I was extraordinarily lucky in that we lived at Mosman, and my father's brother, who was younger, was unmarried, and so at that stage, so he used to come and stay with us a lot, and he was a painter. And he had wonderful little oil paints with dear little screw-top lids that were made of metal. And he used to let me use all his oil paints and have a go, as long as I got the screwing up of the lids absolutely precisely done. So I was given a free hand and encouraged to paint. And there'd been painting in my father's family. My father's aunt was a painter in Paris. She went to Paris in 1900, came back and had an exhibition at the King Street Gallery in about 1935. And so I guess there'd always been kind of a bit of painting and mucking around in that family. And in fact, my parents were very open to it, and they gave me the downstairs lavatory in our house as my little art gallery that I was allowed to hang pictures in. So I used to paint and then put the paintings up in the lavatory.
This one here, remember I was telling you about the downstairs lavatory? My studio when I was a child at Mosman. Yeah. This one was in there.
And then I went on, and I would love to have done art at school, but unfortunately the school that I was at, they wouldn't let you do art if you could do physics and chemistry and things. So I did the sciences and the maths and things, and in those days art was kind of for the dummies, unfortunately, and so I didn't do it. And then I went on and did architecture at Sydney University, and we had the most fabulous art department where Rolly Wakeland was the head of the art department, and Lloyd Rees was his underling, and John Santry was under Lloyd Rees. So we just had these wonderful, wonderful teachers and raconteurs who told us the stories of, art in early Sydney, and were very, very involved. And it was really like a renaissance, looking back on it, of what a privilege it was to have had all those wonderful mentors. I entered the Archibald for the first time in about 79 or 8, and painted Thelma Clune, who was a great mate of mine. And she hadn't told me that Thompson was also painting her that year, and in fact he'd won the Archibald the year before. So it was one of those ones where I was very lucky. They hung both our paintings in the same show with the same subject, and then the next year I entered Peter Weir, the film man, great mate, and his was hung, and it was John MacDonald, who used to write the reviews at the time, said, well, this is a 2-horse race between Guy Warren and my painting of Peter Weir, and Guy Warren's won with Bert Flugelman. And anyhow, the next year I painted my old art teacher, Lloyd Rees, and he was a lovely man. He came over and we spent a lot of time chatting and painting. And I went to his studio where I did some of the sketches. And it was, he said, you're a decorative painter. And I said, oh, really? I said, I know that's not the thing you're meant to be. I know that's a bit of an insult, is it? Or it's a bit confronting. And he said, no, you definitely are. So he said, I am, but we just relax with that. We're not making political statements or whatever. We're decorative, and that's okay. Anyway, his portrait wasn't hung, and I painted for the Archibald every year since then, and I haven't been hung again. So it's just one of those things, but I actually really enjoy the process of thinking about who I'd like to paint, and then the interaction with them, and the actual process of the painting. So it's probably nearly a 40-year-old story or something, but it's a different story. it's not a struggle story, but it's a story, a kind of private journey story within myself about my own painting. And I can look back on things and I think, oh yes, I remember that year, that's the year I painted so-and-so. And then you recall the things that happened when you were doing that. Yeah. So it sort of punctuates your life a bit in painting terms, in much the same way that, holidays punctuate my life too. I think, I don't necessarily equate my life so much to my architectural jobs, but a lot to holidays and things that you're doing. And definitely painting. So I learnt to swim at the rock pool just along from the old net, and when we progressed we used to swim in the net, and it was quite a magic part of Balmoral. Everyone swam in the net, and then in the winter they'd take the net up and repair it, and then they'd put it back. But quite often with the storms there'd get big holes in the net, and there were sharks inside the net and not outside the net. But it was one of those things also where all the seagulls would rest on that lovely curve of the top wire and roost there in the evening. And so there was always a lot of the clatter of the seagulls and things. But Balmoral has a magic. It's a wonderful magic. The moon rises right through the middle of the heads in the middle of winter, and it's just the efflorescence and the magic of the whole thing. And walking around the rocks there, it's just a playground for children and adults. It's one of life's priceless spots. I just remember thinking it was a really lovely day, and I was doing a house down near Balmoral, and I thought, oh, I'll take a couple of canvases. And so I took a few canvases and I just did the net from that little park looking across. And then I went to the other end of Balmoral and did something, and there were some lovely sailing boats at the other end with red sails. So I painted them setting up their sails on the beach at that end. And I think, I really can't remember when it was. It wouldn't have been the middle of summer, because it would have been too hot. Being out, when you're sitting out there for an hour, more than a couple of, an hour or two, it's too hot if it's in the full sun. It does change, yes, definitely. Things do change, and the colours change too, slightly. I've definitely got a love affair with Viridian, which is a beautiful green with a bit of blue in it. And then there's a deep red alizarin. When you combine those two colours, you get the most fabulous greys, and you get warm greys. So that's the base of my greys, and you get nearly something as dark as the darkest colour you'd like to use if you get enough green into the red. So it's just the balancing of those two. And then of course if you add an azure blue or something to those, you can, but certainly yes, I do have a palette and I just use it all the time, and occasionally I go into the paint shop or something and I see all these other wonderful colours and I think, oh look, I'm going to lash out, and I buy the other colours and I never really use them. I just go back to the same old favourites all the time. I was very privileged to be Neil and Diane Balnave's architect for their house in Mosman, and it was a journey that it actually took slightly longer than it would normally, because unfortunately Neil had a very bad boating accident just around the time that we had hoped to have started, and that process of his rehabilitation took some time, where he had to learn to walk again and whatever. But he'd lived in Mosman for a very long time and just loved it. And he had and so did Diane and the family, and they were brought up there. And he wanted to give something back to Mosman, so he had these really wonderful collection of Mosman paintings, which he has given to the gallery, and it's a huge gift, and I think that each of the paintings is very beautiful and very different, and what a wonderful thing to give. It's very, very generous, fabulous family. I'd say get a lovely little drawing book, perhaps A5 size, and just keep it with you and try and do a drawing every day. So I believe that drawing teaches us to look at things carefully. So we become so much more acute in what we see by drawing it. If you look at it, you don't really see it intensely until you start putting it on paper. So once you start putting them down, then you get the skill of being able to represent your thoughts with something that's on a page, and then you don't mind sharing it perhaps with someone, and from there you can use those little vignette drawings to make paintings or to experiment, or it's much easier than taking the brushes and things out into the field.